Without God, I would have never found sobriety. Without sobriety, I'd never found God. Through Him, I've been resurrected and I live a new life, a good life. My name is Michael, and this is my story from death to resurrection. I was born in 1974 in Ida, Michigan, and I was the oldest of 4 boys. My mom and dad were Christians, and I grew up next door to my grandpa and grandma and my mom's 2 younger brothers. We ate corn on the cob and fresh vegetables out of the garden, and we went to church every Sunday. We had Sunday afternoon dinners, and life was grand. I couldn't ask for anything more as an upbringing until I turned 9, and I had no idea my parents had problems. I don't know if they knew, but my dad left. My youngest brother wasn't even born yet, and I became an adult real quick. It was time to grow up and help my mom raise my brothers, and I was an all-star baseball player. I was popular in school. Everything was great, and when my dad left, my mom couldn't afford the house anymore and she had to sell it. We moved to a bigger school. I was no longer the fastest, the smartest, the quickest. I fell into just wanting to be part of something, somebody. Started hanging out with kids I normally would have never known about. I knew Jesus loved me. I grew up in the church. Summer vacation Bible school, Christmas pageants, reciting scripture. I think I was David once. Maybe I was Joseph once. I don't know. I did a lot of things in the church, and I knew Jesus, but I didn't understand why I wasn't where I was before. So moving forward, in my teens, I started drinking a lot. Got my driver's license and attended high school sometimes, not too often. And the first day of my junior year, I quit school. I thought I was gonna play in a rock and roll band and everything was gonna be my way. I had forgotten about God's way, and it was honestly the last thing on my mind. I thought I knew everything and I knew exactly what I was doing. Well, Mom was doing her best, and I gave her a real hard time. When I was 16, she didn't know what to do with me, and she gave me an option. Either I'm going to put you in a juvenile home and they can straighten you out, or you can go live with your dad in Arizona, because I'm honestly just tired of finding you here drunk, passed out, not knowing where you're at and not knowing how you got home when you do get home. So off to Arizona I went. The next week I traveled out there with my grandparents, and I was in Tucson in the desert, and Dad didn't help the drinking much. In fact, he asked me what we were drinking the night I got there. And my alcoholism got super bad at that point. My dad had remarried, and I had 2 half-brothers. They were the same age as my youngest biological brother. My dad drank with me, and I decided at some point that I was going to quit school again because couldn't stay drunk in school. And I had a relationship with my stepmother, a sexual relationship. And I think that's where trauma really started for me. My dad struggled financially with bills and keeping food on the table. And it was a really dark time in my life, and sometimes my stepmom was mom and sometimes she was lover. And I really didn't understand life at all, and I was lost. Dad came home one day and told me he started going to church. I'm like, great. And they're gonna help us, and they're gonna pay our rent, and they're gonna do this and that. Well, the pastor had come over and told me that I needed a deliverance or an exorcism, and I was possessed by demons. And well, my family believed that. And the night before I was saved, I remember Dad came home from that church and threw everything in the driveway. All my music, newspapers, the TVs, pictures off the walls, anything that wasn't holy in his eyes, and he lit a match to it. And I knew that wasn't God, and I knew that's what I wasn't taught that, and I was really lost spiritually. I didn't know why my family was acting this way, and if anybody was possessed, it was them. And you know, I was saved that next day. After my exorcism or deliverance or whatever you want to call it, the demons were called out of me, and it was a very traumatic spiritual event. But when I said the sinner's prayer, I meant it in my heart, because I knew what I was taught, and I knew what my grandparents taught me. That next couple days, my dad told me I either get a job or go into the Air Force Reserve, which was taking 17-year-old dropouts for the Gulf War. And he said, there's a guy down the street with his son pounding fence posts. Why don't you go see if he needs some help? And I went and I got some help from that man. His name is Mr. Roberts, and he was a Christian man. And right away he knew that I was a troubled kid, and I was scared. And I told him some of the things that was going on with my stepmom and my dad. And he took me, he gave me a place to live and told me I never had to go back there. He reassured me that Jesus loved me. And I was still scared of the church. And Mr. Roberts gave me a lot of opportunities, gave me a truck, and he gave me a camper to live in. He gave me a job. I ran that ranch, and I worked real hard for him. And he told me, he said, you know, I'll put you in any biblical school in the country, or I'll send you home, because I know you miss your friends and your mom. Sorry. Yeah, Mr. Roberts loved me like Jesus would love me. And he made that clear that that's how I should be loved. But He gave me a choice. I chose to go home, and the crowd I left was still the same crowd when I got back, and it wasn't long. I went to a few churches, and I was confused. I didn't know what was the right church. I didn't know that Catholics were right or wrong, or Lutherans were right or wrong, and I was lost spiritually. Sober for the first time in my teen years, and I was just lost. And it started with a cigarette, and then I was drinking again, and then at 18 I decided to maybe smoking weed was my thing. And when I was 20 years old, I was pretty heavy into weed and drinking. I met a girl that had more problems than me, and I had completely forgot about God at this point, and I thought I could help her. And if I could help her, I could save me. And she was a troubled young lady, and I fell head over heels for her. And I knew she had problems at home. I knew she was probably a runaway, and she was, and I told her I'd take her anywhere in the country. I was 20 years old. There was nothing stopping me. I could do anything. I could do anything that I set my mind to it, and that was my attitude at that point. And I opened the map. I said, "Where do you want to go?" And she goes, "I don't know. I've never been any farther than Ohio." And I said, "How about Arizona? I got people there." So here I go back to Arizona, where all the trauma started. But some reason that I'm going to go back there and start a new life. And I wasn't there too long, about 3 weeks before I found some weed. And I didn't just find some weed, I found methamphetamines for the first time. And it wasn't too long after that, she was pregnant, and we decided we had to go home to our parents because we're just kids and we're having a baby. The drugs were out of control as it was. I wasn't sleeping for weeks. So we went home to Michigan, and we had a baby, and she's my pride and joy. My daughter, Katie. I was still just a kid wanting to party, though. You'd think I'd stop because I'm a father now. The first 2 years of her life was a lot of drinking and acid, weed constantly. And we had a trailer, lived in a trailer park, just doing my best, I thought. And fell into a lot of dark times. Her mother was never... I know she's gonna see this. This is hard. Yeah, her mother was not faithful, and I'd take her back no matter what. So the next 10 years, I was just trying to get it together, but I didn't sober up long enough to get it together, and I'd forgotten about God. My grandpa and grandma passed, and I know I didn't make them too proud. But as my daughter grew, I Finally got my diploma for her, my GED. You know, went back to school and started moving forward, but the cocaine and ecstasy, mescaline, GHB, whatever was coming through the town, that's what I was doing, and I couldn't put a hold of job for more than a week or two, it seemed like at times, maybe a month, never more than a year. Eventually I started driving truck, and I got to go to work for the same company my dad worked for. Dad trained me. Dad and I had a lot of heart-to-hearts, but not the right ones. I had stopped doing drugs. I got off cocaine long enough to get a job, and I still wasn't sober. Anytime that truck stopped, I was drinking, and I was miserable. I didn't have God in my life, is what it comes down to. I was trying to please everybody but Him. I came home off the road, still occasionally doing drugs when I could fit it in between a drug screen. You know, I had my CDL, and I was working, making more money than I had ever made. But I was still miserable. My daughter's mom was in and out of my life, mostly out of it, but she seen things were good. She came back, and I said, well, let's move to my dad's in Arizona. Again, I'm gonna go back where all the drugs are at. And things were good for a minute, but eventually it started with weed and then the meth. I had my first back surgery right before I had left Michigan, and they prescribed me pills. And I really took a liking to the pills, especially when I was drinking. But I didn't have a problem, you know. She had my baby's mother had the problem. At least I wasn't doing that. And, you know, at least I'm not smoking crack until I smoked crack, and at least I'm only doing pills until I did heroin. Life got worse. It was a downward spiral. Arizona was a horrible place for me. Beautiful place. God's done amazing work there, but it wasn't a place for me to maintain any kind of sobriety. Eventually the drugs caught up with me. I ended up losing a different job that my dad got me because I dropped dirty for THC. And my truck driving career was pretty much over at that time. I started picking up odd jobs, tow truck, cement mixer, the meth pipe, a lot. Eventually it was like we were taking my daughter's toys and games and books back to the shops so we could sell them and get maybe a new book or a new toy for her. And that's how we did Christmas for a while. And I was just completely lost and broken. It came to a point where I was unemployed, collecting unemployment, which was not a lot, just enough to pay for a place to live, until it didn't. And I was back at Dad's again. My dad did bail me out several times, and I love him for that. He gave my family a place to live. And this time, well, she's pregnant again. So in 2009, my baby boy was born. I was a mess, living in a Studio 6 when I brought him home. My daughter was from place to place, and she did an amazing job graduating all by herself. I didn't have anything to do with it. Her mother didn't have anything to do with it. She did that. I moved that kid all over the city of Tucson, all over, and she always made it to school. My dad's mom died, and I was on meth when she died, and I didn't make her proud either. Things got worse. The meth became heroin, and heroin became intravenous, and I was doing something I thought I'd never ever do in my life, and that was shooting up, hiding it from everyone, I thought, but I'm pretty sure even my kid knew. My daughter was raising my son. I mean, we were there, but we weren't. I was out hustling 16 hours a day if that's what it took. And something had to change. I had to go home and face my family and get off this heroin. So we did. We made it back to Michigan on a bus that my dad paid for. Again, he bailed me out. We didn't really have a place to live still, and we were still from hotel to hotel, her mom's, my mom's. The heroin didn't stop. It just kept getting worse. I was arrested multiple times for drug paraphernalia. At some point, they just seen me and knew that I had drugs or a needle or something on me. In 2014, CPS came to the jail. And they asked me who I would like to take care of my son, because his mom also was locked up. I'm sorry. I gotta get a grip on myself.
Take a breather. Take a breather. Go ahead. You're okay, man. You got it.
It hurts so. And my daughter, she stayed behind in Arizona. So my brother took my son, and I was gonna do everything right. And then his mom was released, and I got picked up again after that. And of course, I was using again. And you'd think I'd learned my lesson. CPS had enough, and I knew I wasn't at this point gonna get my son. And I went up to Detroit. I got his mother out of rehab, talked her out of that. She was doing well for herself. Knew that I was out on bond, and if she left, she would be violating probation. And we left, and we went all the way across the country. I'd been homeless for 6-7 years at this point, but I'd had my kids, so I always had a place to go. Even if it was just a hotel room, I always had that. Or a friend or a family member. Sometimes my daughter would take my son, and they'd stay at her friend's while we slept in the car. When we didn't have a car, we had a backpack between us. Left Detroit on foot. Made it all the way to Las Vegas. Spent some time in St. Louis, Lima, Ohio, Indianapolis. Chasing dope the whole way. Living in abandoned buildings and under bridges. Just so I didn't have to think about the mess I made. Made it from, things got pretty crazy in Las Vegas, and I was doing a lot of things for a lot of people that weren't God's people. They weren't exactly doing godly things, and I had to get out of Las Vegas before I died or went to prison. So I found some good church people, and good church people helped me get all the way across the country. And I made it to Houston, Texas, via some real good people I met in Las Vegas that helped me out. And Houston was it's a big city, and it was really hard to live on the streets. I was beat up a lot. I was ripped off even more. My relationship with her was violent, to say the least. I'd go weeks, months without a shower. And I met some guys that asked me to go to work for them, and I did that, and I started doing some terrible things that I'll never be able to make amends for. But I did a little time in the state penitentiary, like 18 months of time in the state penitentiary, and 4 months of that 18 was in solitary in a mental hospital, a state prison mental hospital. And I spent a lot of time in there reading the Bible and getting to know God, because it's all I had. And I know who my God is. And I know He's going to make a way when there's no way. Every time. I wasn't crazy, but They said I had a mood disorder, which I'm sure I had a lot of disorders because I was on a lot of drugs. The K2 was everywhere down there. It was a pandemic, the synthetic marijuana, and it just had me out of my mind. I got out after 18 months, and I did another 6 months, out on the streets. On March 9th, 2017, I was arrested in a bank for fraud again. And I went to jail in Tyler, Texas. And that was the best day of my life. God showed himself in a form of handcuffs. And at the time I was cussing God and didn't understand why I was going back to prison, why I was laying on this cold concrete floor, dope sick again, so far away from any family that I knew. And it was the biggest blessing that I could have ever had. While I was in Bradshaw State Prison, I was writing my mom, and my mom she never stopped praying. That said, I've been doing a lot of praying, and I've been talking with your uncles who have been doing a lot of praying, and the church they go to has been praying, and they want me to come get you. God wants me to come get you. And I said, okay, but I'm still wanted in Monroe. I couldn't have any contact with my son, and my brother's raising him. He lives in Monroe. So how's this gonna work, Mom? She said, just tell me you're gonna be there when you get out, and God will figure it out. My mom held her promise, and her and my brother showed up in Texas, and they brought me home. And I told her, I said, Ma, I can't stay sober. And I'm gonna need some help. I don't know what that is, but I'm gonna need some help. So I got back to Toledo, and one of my brother's fiancés at the time told me about Racing for Recovery, and they taught me about sobriety and continued sobriety and total sobriety, which was a new concept to me. It was like a toddler that just learned how to walk. I was doing everything without drugs or alcohol. But I started going to church that same week. I found Bedford Alliance, found my church family. So on April the 14th, 2018, I was water baptized at Bedford Alliance, and that was the best, scariest day of my life, because I made a promise that I wasn't certain that I could keep. I came out of that tub and was just like, oh my gosh, what have I done? Can I really do this? Can I really be a new person? Can God really change me? I was only 3 months sober. My life started there. This is where my resurrection was. I was dead up until that point, and I felt the Holy Spirit for the first time in a long time, and I had surrendered completely, and I said, God, I can't do this no more. I need you. And he answered that prayer. I met my wife in 2018. We dated a couple years and got married July 25th of 2020 in the middle of a pandemic. I had started going to college. I had started wanting to learn what Racing for Recovery was teaching me, not just for my own benefits, but to share it with others. Started working with the church and serving every Sunday. And then we started a recovery program, Bedford Alliance Recovery. And I just wanted to give back to the community that I ran crazy in, or just ran wild over. My mom and everybody involved, all the teachers and everybody that wanted to do good in my life that I just turned my back on. I wanted to give back to them, and I didn't want anybody to ever have to go through the streets and the prostitution and the stealing and the guilt that I had to feel every time I went to prison. So I had to start giving back, be running the cameras at church or the lights, or going down and talking to the homeless in downtown Toledo and telling them they were worth something, that they are somebody and Jesus does love them and there is hope, because I am hope. And I was living, breathing testimony of what God does if you ask Him. And I searched for a purpose in my life, and God blessed me with my wife and told me I could be a man, a husband. I could be everything to her, and we could have a covenant under God's law and please Him while we did it. So no matter how broken and how hurt and how strung out you are, God still loves you, and He'll still make a way for you. He was there in the streets, under the bridges, in the abandoned houses, in the trap houses. He was there, and He had plans for me, just like He has for you. Well, in November of 21, my parents remarried, and they're both back in my life, and they support me. And my son, I still don't have a relationship with him. I've been asked, what would you tell your son right now? I'm doing the best I can. There's hope for me. Currently in my life, I'm 2 years into my bachelor's degree. I work at Racing for Recovery now. I get to serve at Bedford Alliance still in the recovery ministry and watch lives change every week. God gives me that peace that gives me happiness that I could never, ever describe in words. I get tears thinking about the serenity and the peace that I have. And I can't explain the love I have for Him or that He has for me.